What were the most ridiculous demands or rules from your controlling partner? I applied and got accepted into a school far away from him. Once he found out about it, he demanded I fill out his application and write his essays so he could come with me. I did not. I had a guy freak out when I got accepted to college even though it was in the same city. That's why you don't date unemployed 21-year-olds when you're 17, even if they can buy alcohol. He was expecting me to pop out babies and move into his mum's house. I was just like, ha, nope, bye. I was engaged to a man who had to approve each meal, and I wasn't allowed to eat if he wasn't present. He bought my clothes, and he always brought them 2 sizes too small, so I felt pressured to fit into them. I left him for a chef. That is crazy. Good on you for going for the chef. Crazy and controlling guys are so weird about food. One guy I dated was obsessed with me going out, as in, he thought I shouldn't eat out ever. I had a routine set up where I would head over to my friend's house after work on Friday night. We'd smoke, go eat Mexican food, and then he just showed up there randomly one Friday just as we were about to leave and tried to give me leftovers from like 4 days ago to eat instead of eating delicious Mexican food. I told him to F right off, and my friends made fun of him relentlessly. The next day, I told him we were better off as friends. He cried and tried to bargain and say that he would ease up on the eating out thing. I did not agree to that bargain. Oh, you know, just your run-of-the-mill OAG stuff. She demanded to snoop through not only my phone, but my physical items as well. When I wasn't with her, she demanded to know what I was doing and who I was with, and even went as far as to make me take pictures of what I was doing. She even made me give her my Reddit account to make sure I wasn't PMing girls on here. What truly takes the cake was when she accused me of cheating because she found a half-eaten Pop-Tart in my car. My friend borrowed my car and had forgotten it. She saw the Pop-Tart and demanded to know who it belonged to, or it was over. In short, was accused of cheating because of a rogue Pop-Tart. People like this, her, are usually cheating themselves. I dated a guy in high school who exhibited a lot of these behaviors. One time I was on the bus on the way to work and he called me freaking out because he had driven to my school to pick me up unannounced. But since I'd already left, I wasn't there. He was insisting that I was in a guy friend's car and that I'd left early deliberately to avoid him. What the frick? The same guy also offered to build me a PC. This was in the early 2000s and got upset when I refused to let him install remote access, so he could check up on my system and log into my accounts whenever he wanted. Ugh. Yuck. Good save on the remote access thing. If they made it sound innocent enough to just be checking up on updates and things, I can see some people letting them install that software and being completely at his digital mercy. If you don't have anything to hide, why don't you show me? Run away if you hear that. One time I left a class where we were assigned a group project in college. I met with my group immediately after for about half an hour. About 20 calls and 40 texts. Like she thought I was effing a stranger in the middle of the day? I'd get a call about twice a week from her freaking out because she thought someone put anthrax in her food. She broke 2 of my cell phones. The worst thing was in arguments, when she stood in front of the door and wouldn't move, stopping me from leaving. I couldn't move her because she'd say I hit her or something. That's the only woman I've ever called the C word, and I don't regret it whatsoever, because that's what she was. I was doing laundry at my mum's about 10 minutes down the road where there's no cell service. I came back to a torrent of paranoid manic texts just as she was peeling out of our apartment. Accused me of cheating on her, sleeping with a girl at work, who was a lesbian by the way, setting up fake Facebook accounts to bang my ex, you get the picture. After some weeks of this bullcrap, she introduced me to some guy she knew from high school while we were out at the bar. Mind you, I did this once, introduced her to an old friend who was dating one of my best bros. She accused me of doing the deed with her. Anyway, I came back to the apartment to find her and this guy watching a movie. She acted like it was no big deal and told me to give them space. That cued a visit to my landlady downstairs. I explained what was up. She was very kind and understanding. I always paid my half on time and helped her out around the property, so she let me forfeit my security deposit and break the lease. Since my ex was always such a cold witch to my landlady, who was a nice single mum with a nice rack, she got a whole slew of lease-breaking claims brought down on the crazy witch because my landlady had been cheated on before and felt bad for me, called collections, etc. Now the psycho is living with her mum, got knocked up by her new landscaper substance-using boyfriend, and is going for the DUI hat trick. You're not allowed to do the hard Sudokus unless you can solve the medium ones in 5 minutes. Why are you controlling my puzzle-solving habits? That guy was weird. That almost sounds like he was trying to be funny. Right after my first year of college, and she was still in high school, I joined the local volunteer fire department. She told me she didn't want me doing CPR on women because I would see their chests. Yes, everyone knows that old ladies who've fallen and can't get up have fantastic wrecks. If we weren't together physically, we had to be in constant communication. I was required to call him immediately at the end of my workday and talk to him for the duration of my 1-hour commute home. If I took too long to call, he would call me and berate me. Once I finally got home, I was allowed to take a break for dinner before chatting with him online. Absolutely exhausting. My ex told me that I wasn't allowed to look at other women. I don't mean I wasn't allowed to stare at or ogle attractive women. I mean that my field of vision wasn't allowed to contain anyone with a uterus. At work, out and about, sometimes even on the fricking TV, if she'd decided that I was looking at any woman that wasn't her at any time, I'd be in for it. I had a similar rule from a girlfriend. TV people were allowed though. That year, MTV Spring Break aired for the first time and I wasn't allowed to watch after the first episode. Because apparently those weren't real TV people, just whores who happened to be on TV. I could go on for pages about her. It ended extremely badly for me. In high school, I had a controlling ex-girlfriend who would demand I talk to her for 5 to 7 hours a day, and if I didn't, I would get texts from her trying to self-delete constantly. Yeah, that was not a fun time. 0 out of 10 would not go through again. Sometimes I'm glad cell phones weren't super popular until the end or just after my years in high school. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 18. It was easier back then to have boundaries instead of being tethered to someone 24/7. I had a boyfriend who felt I should be responsible for his emotional well-being. I believe at one point he actually said, "I'm feeling like crap and it's your fault, so you should be the one to fix it." I think that might have been after I moved out due to his behavior. Emotional IQ of a toddler, that one. My ex cut the cord of the TV and he only put it back on when he was home. I was home alone with 2 little kids all day and I was chemo sick. Also, when I made dinner, I wasn't allowed to tell him when it was ready because he said I was not going to tell him when it's time to eat. Another time I got beat for taking off my wedding bands when I made meatloaf. The meat would get caught in my rings. Needless to say, I took my kids and walked away from him, our house, and everything I owned. F him. I dearly hope that you never saw that person again, author. Imagine forfeiting a hot, fresh dinner because it hurts your ego to be told dinner is ready. I wonder if he was the same way with waiters. He didn't want me talking to any males, even family members. Not even a simple hello with a friendly smile because this was me flirting with them. And if a guy spoke to me first, then he was flirting with me. The guy tried to make me lose my job because I'm surrounded by men all day and he didn't like that. He'd basically tell me what to do with my life, changes I needed to make, which were stupid things like me wearing makeup because I wanted to, but if I tried to tell him he needed to quit drinking, he was an alcoholic, and skipping work because of hangovers from drinking, then I was controlling and needed to stop trying to change who he is. He didn't want me wearing skirts or shirts that showed any cleave. Pretty hard with my large chest, by the way, because then men would stare. And by the way, they weren't staring. I couldn't wear makeup on any normal day, especially if I was going somewhere without him. Because I was trying to look good for someone else? No matter how many times I explained makeup is a hobby and I do it for myself, not to look good for anyone else, not even him. Speaking of makeup, he would yell at me if I even bought a $3 lipstick because it's a waste of money. And then he'd spend a ton on beer. He'd even make me buy the beer when he didn't want to because I make more than him and he needed to save, but would spend all of his money in beer and cigarettes when he made me broke. He even made me buy multiple controllers and gaming headphones because it was my fault when he broke them when mad because of Call of Duty Online. All I'd do is say maybe he should stop playing because he was getting worked up. Probably worst of all was he didn't want me spending time and playing with my 6-year-old brother who I adore. I ignored that and even let my bro in the bedroom with me, which would make my ex extremely mad. I was a university tour guide, a position she tried and failed to get. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. However, when I had to go to a mandatory training or, I don't know, give a tour, I obviously needed to tell her where I was going since she always needed a good reason for me to be anywhere but with her. So I'd have to say, I have something to do, and she'd ask what, and I'd say something vague, because, I couldn't talk about it. So she'd press more, getting very angry and upset that I was being vague. So I'd be less vague, and she'd get more upset. So I admit that it was for training for my job, and then she gets furious that I talked about it and taunted that she didn't have the job. Led to quite a lot of shouting and crying in the library. Holy crap! Talk about a catch-22. What a lunatic. It was the worst, especially with this detail. I tried out for tour guide in my freshman year and I made the first 2 cuts, but not the final one. Her and I started dating sophomore year, and I went back for it and suddenly she was all interested in being a tour guide too. So this time I managed to get the job, and she does like I did and made the first 2 cuts but not the final. When she found out that she didn't make it, she didn't talk to anyone for about 2 days. And from that point on, she'd always go on about how I couldn't imagine what it feels like to not make the cut. Blah, blah, blah. B-word, the same thing happened to me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. I mean, there were a lot from my ex-husband. I was severely depressed and tried to self-delete a few times, and he wouldn't make money available for therapy. Even though he was unemployed, he was still in control of the finances. He just kept saying I wouldn't need therapy if I just listened to him. He also had rules that changed frequently about how many slices of cheese or meat I was allowed to put on my sandwiches. He also used to have a rule that I wasn't allowed to drink coffee because, his words, he didn't want me to be engaged in an addiction that he didn't share with me. Smoking and drinking were okay, apparently. He also used to scout friends for me and bring them home and expect me to just be friends with them? And if it didn't click for either of us, he would yell at me for screwing up. I wasn't allowed to write anything, like stories or poetry, and then refuse to let him read it. And I wasn't allowed to listen to any of my favorite music. If I put on any of my favorite music on my iPod, he would take my iPod at night and replace it with music he approved of. After we divorced, I learned he actually liked some of the same bands I did, but refused to let me listen because he didn't want me to have my own thing. He felt that drove me away from him. Again, his words. I wasn't allowed to wear any clothes that made my chest look weird, which seemed to be an entirely arbitrary qualification that changed from day to day. I couldn't keep up and often had to throw out clothes that I really liked because they didn't meet his specific needs when it came to having to look at me. It's been 7 years since I left his sorry butt, and I'm still afraid of posting this, and that some of you are going to tell me how justified he was. He really had me believing that he was the king of the fricking universe and he was right about everything. I still have nightmares about everyone in my life turning on me and saying he actually was right all along. Oh, and I forgot the actual best part. I wasn't allowed to sleep. He was an insomniac and would get angry and jealous when I slept 8 hours a night. I'd go to bed and he'd spend 3 or 4 hours working himself into a rage over it, then he'd pound on the bedroom door, slam it open, turn on the lights and start screaming at me. This happened at least once a week for almost 10 years. I still get nervous when I go to bed by myself at night. I had to ask permission to go to the mall by myself. I wasn't allowed to go to the gym as it meant I was making myself look better for other people. I also wasn't allowed to change my password on my laptop as it meant I had something to hide. Boy, was that a fun relationship. Oh my god, I can't even imagine sticking around after the first one of those restrictions came up. Imagine just wanting to keep your partner indoors, getting out of shape and doing nothing with their life. And why would you want to date that if you were said controlling spouse? My ex got angry if we were in the car together and I looked outside the window at scenery. Apparently, I was checking out other guys. This also applied to other cars. I wasn't allowed to look out the window and compare his car to theirs because this was seen as a betrayal. In the shopping center or mall, I could only look at the floor because then I would be accused of checking out other guys. Again. There were many other things, but when I got into a new relationship, my new boyfriend was surprised when I asked, "Am I allowed to look out the window?" Looking confused, he said, "Of course, why wouldn't you?" I then realized how socially conditioned my ex made me, and I'm still trying to undo the damaging behaviors I learned. I love this because I can totally relate. My ex used to go freaking bonkers if there was a dish in the sink. It could have been a freaking spoon that he made dirty, and if I didn't clean it, he wouldn't speak to me, or he'd yell. A couple of weeks ago, I found some mold in the sink. My husband and I have a very long commute with only enough time left at the end of the day for a meal and a shower, so things don't get cleaned as often as they should, and I was afraid to tell him about the mold. I sheepishly said, I found some mold in the sink. His response? Yucky. What did I do? I squeezed him harder than I thought I could. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm only including a small portion of what I experienced, but it was a living hell for the 2 years. I wasn't allowed to talk to my best friend about anything serious. It had to be him I spoke to. I couldn't wear floral print. When I didn't lose 30 kilos, I managed 10 in a month. He said I wasn't trying hard enough. He told me he wanted a break for a year, I should move on, focus on myself and find someone else. When he found out that I'd moved on, 4 months later, he showed up at my door and asked to talk, where he ran me into the ground. I've never been more upset before. I really felt like I'd done something wrong when I'd done everything he'd asked. Poster child of narcissistic personality disorder. Wait a minute, 10 kilos in 1 month, and he wanted you to lose 30? That translates to about 20 to 60 US pounds if I'm understanding it right. The maximum healthy weight that's normal for 1 month is about 10 pounds or 5 kgs. So if I read that right and my math is right, the only way to lose 30 kilos in 1 month is to cut off your leg. I was dating this girl a while ago, I'm also a girl by the way, who would get upset when I would wear dresses and skirts because I looked more femme than her, and she didn't want people to think she was the guy in our relationship. A year and a half after our breakup and I have more than 15 dresses in my closet that I rotate through every day and she can go F herself. I had a good friend with a controlling boyfriend who didn't want her wearing skirts and dresses either. He compromised by letting her wear them with shorts underneath if they were appropriate enough by his standards. One day, she and I went to the mall together and she had on a cute dress. We had a nice little day together, then we went back to her place. When we walked up to the door, the first thing her now ex-boyfriend did was march over, give her a disgusted look and pull up her dress right in front of me to make sure she had shorts on underneath. It was really sad. Oh boy, my time to shine. I was required each night to inform her of the time I would be getting up the next morning. If I was not up, she would message all of my friends asking what happened to me. I would occasionally be required to make wake-up calls to her as she didn't like any of her phone alarms. She forbid me from messaging my ex, who had recently come out as lesbian. She thought I would try to get her to come back to me. I was forbidden from voicing my opinion about a coworker of hers who she had been in a relationship with previously. I had to give an explanation and an apology if I ever stopped texting her for some reason. Some examples include brushing my teeth, eating, walking the dog, picking up friends or family members if they needed a ride somewhere. She was a non-stop texter even when she was driving. I wasn't allowed to be upset by this even though I made it clear that an ex-friend killed someone texting and driving. I wasn't allowed to make plans on the fly. Everything needed to be scheduled days in advance even with other friends. When I broke up with her, she threatened to have her sister and her sister's boyfriend beat the crap out of me to get me to stay. When I refused to give in and continued to try to break up with her, she threatened to self-delete. Anytime I spoke to a female friend of mine, I was under suspicion of being a cheater, and she demanded that I let her inspect my phone. She was not happy when she learned that I watched adult content and demanded to know the genre that I watched. She said she was in love with me after a month in and was upset when I didn't reciprocate. She threatened to go back to her coworker unless I declared my love for her then and there. She prank called me to break up with me on several occasions and then got mad at me for being teed off. Doing the same thing to her was forbidden. I lasted 2 months. I was a bit whipped, honestly. There's kind of a TV sitcom trope of the hilarious whipped boyfriend, and I have just realized how objectively horrifying some of those relationships would be if focused on for any amount of time. 2 months of this sounds like hell. The most ridiculous demand? Probably that I couldn't sleep until she did because she wanted to talk to me, despite me normally going to sleep before 12 and her frequently staying up till 3 or 4 a.m. If I insisted on going to sleep, she would get mad. If I then caved and told her, okay, I'll talk to you, she would keep on hammering about the fact that I would go to sleep without talking to her. There were many, many other ridiculous demands and reasons she got angry, but that one stood out. Fortunately, she's an ex now. My first girlfriend had a huge body issue about the size of her chest. They were small and perky and I liked them, plus she had an hourglass figure and a wonderful butt. Anyway, she'd freak out if we watched a movie together and there was a busty girl on the screen. She'd often even physically cover my eyes with her hand, even in a movie theater. If we were walking on the street and a busty girl walked past, she'd be staring at me with a death glare to see if I even glanced towards her. Her little sister had a larger bust than her, so she was constantly insanely paranoid that I was secretly lusting after her 14-year-old sister. It was just a trip to the Twilight Zone. This was like 15 years ago, so I don't remember all the details anymore. I think at some point, when we were just flirting and not together yet, she asked what kind of girls I liked, and I said something about curves. Perhaps that somehow triggered her insane uncertainty, but I didn't even mean bust size with it. You know, all curves. I explained that to her several times later on, but she insisted I was lying in an attempt to cover my tracks. She demanded I never tickle my pickle ever. This is despite us hardly seeing each other, so the opportunity to release was minuscule. But hey, I was under the thumb. It did give me my first and only wet dream though. Well, you're asking about ridiculous. He demanded that I should answer him anytime he calls, even if I was asleep. Not call him back when I wake up. Also, I had a set of 10 rings on one finger, which he demanded to have the one I liked the most, and was like, "Do you prefer material things over me?" That I not wear shorts around males even during summer when I was playing sports, because he didn't want guys looking at my butt and having thoughts about me. Meanwhile, he changed his Facebook profile picture to one of him standing in a boat, facing away from the camera, fully in the buck to show off his butt tattoo. His reason was, "Yeah, but I'm a guy, so it's different. I've never had such a wonderfully relieving breakup." When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.